I've spent my entire life exceeding expectations, only to still be underestimated, I said, my voice steady as I locked eyes with my stepfather, Jack, across the gleaming conference table. First by you, then by my mother, and now apparently, by this board. I'd love to know which chapter of your hostile takeover playbook we're currently in. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The 12 executives stared back at me in stunned silence. Just moments earlier, these corporate veterans had been trading knowing glances, their condescension barely concealed behind professional smiles as Jack announced his plan to assume control of Cascade Industries, my grandfather's $150 million manufacturing empire that he had explicitly left to me. Let me be perfectly clear, I continued, sliding a sealed document portfolio across the table. This company isn't up for negotiation. It never was. My grandfather's will is explicit, and what you're attempting borders on corporate theft. Jack's face flushed deep crimson. His eyes darted to my mother, Diane, who sat frozen beside him. They had both severely underestimated what I had discovered in my grandfather's private study last night, and what I was prepared to do with that information. Tyler, my mother began, using the mollifying tone she reserved for when she thought I was being unreasonable. You're only 28. You've never run a business. Jack has over 20 years of corporate management experience. And zero experience in advanced manufacturing technology, which is the foundation of Cascade Industries, I interrupted. But more importantly, he has no legal right to take what Grandpa explicitly left to me. I opened the folder containing documents that would change everything. Now, would you like to hear what Grandpa discovered about your husband's previous ventures before he died? Or should we discuss how we're going to announce my appointment as CEO to the press tomorrow morning? No one in that room knew the full story yet. How my grandfather's death had set off a chain of events that would expose decades of family secrets. Or how the company everyone was fighting to control was just the beginning of what was really at stake. 3 months earlier, I was living a completely different life. I had graduated with honors in mechanical engineering from MIT the year before, and was working at a promising tech startup in Boston. My one-bedroom apartment was small but comfortable, walking distance to the harbor, and I was slowly making a name for myself in robotics automation. My grandfather, William Harrison, founder and CEO of Cascade Industries, had always been my greatest supporter. But I was determined to make my own way in the tech world, building my reputation on innovation rather than family connections. My relationship with my mother, Diane, had been strained since my father died when I was 14. She remarried quickly, too quickly, in my opinion, to Jack Reynolds, a corporate finance consultant with an MBA from Wharton and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. From the beginning, Jack made it clear that he considered my engineering aspirations academically impressive but commercially impractical. The real money is in acquisitions and financial restructuring, Tyler, he would say during holiday dinners, swirling expensive scotch in a crystal tumbler. Engineers build things. Businessmen build empires. My grandfather was different, a self-made man who had built Cascade Industries from a small machine shop into a national leader in precision manufacturing equipment. He understood my passion for innovation. Every Sunday we had lunch together at his favorite diner, where he'd sketch mechanical concepts on napkins while telling me stories about the early days, when he worked 16-hour shifts to meet his first major contract deadline. Machines aren't just metal, Tyler, he would say, using the full version of my name that only he could get away with. They're solutions. They solve real problems for real people. When you build something that helps others build their dreams, that's a legacy. Make sure what you build matters. I was preparing for a prototype demonstration with potential investors on that rainy Tuesday in February when I got the call from my mother. "Tyler, it's Grandpa," she said, her voice uncharacteristically shaky. "He collapsed at the factory. The ambulance is taking him to Massachusetts General. The next hours passed in a blur. By the time I reached the hospital, my grandfather was in emergency surgery. A massive heart attack, the doctor said. They were doing everything possible, but at 76 with a history of hypertension, I tried not to read too much into the doctor's trailing sentence. My mother and Jack were already there, huddled together in the private waiting room that Jack had somehow secured through connections. This is why he should have retired years. Ego, Jack muttered as I took a seat across from them. The man is 76. He has no business still running a manufacturing operation that size. I ignored him, focusing instead on the surgery updates that came sporadically throughout the evening. At 11:38 p.m., a tired-looking cardiologist entered the waiting room, and I knew from his expression before he spoke. William Harrison, my grandfather, mentor and best friend, hadn't survived the surgery. The following days were a numbing procession of funeral arrangements, condolence calls, and preliminary legal meetings. Cascade Industries continued to operate under the temporary leadership of the executive team, all longtime employees who had worked closely with my grandfather. I took bereavement leave from my job, helping my mother sort through initial paperwork, while trying to process my own grief. It wasn't until the reading of the will, a week after the funeral, that everything changed. The family gathered in the wood-paneled conference room of Blackwell and Associates, my grandfather's law firm. Thomas Blackwell, a silver-haired man who had been my grandfather's attorney and friend for over 40 years, conducted the proceedings with solemn efficiency. There were various bequests, charitable donations, gifts to longtime employees, and personal items for family members. Then Mr. Blackwell reached the section about Cascade Industries. To my grandson, Tyler James Harrison, I leave my controlling interest in Cascade Industries, comprising 68% of outstanding shares and all associated. Voting rights, he read. The room went completely silent. I stared at Mr. Blackwell, certain I had misheard. Furthermore, he continued, it is my explicit wish that Tyler assume the position of Chief Executive Officer of Cascade Industries, effective immediately upon my death. My mother was the first to break the silence. That's impossible, she said, her voice tight. Tyler has no experience running a company. Dad must have been confused when he drafted this. Mr. Blackwell looked at her over his reading glasses. I assure you, Diane, your father was of completely sound mind. We revised this will just 3 months ago, and he was very specific about his wishes. Jack leaned forward, his businessman persona firmly in place. Tom, surely there are provisions for a transition period. Some kind of interim management until Tyler is prepared. There are detailed instructions, Mr. Blackwell acknowledged, turning a page. William has left comprehensive guidance for Tyler, including recommendations for initial steps and key personnel who can support his transition. However, the controlling interest and decision-making authority transfer to him immediately. My mother turned to me, her expression a mixture of disbelief and something that looked almost like betrayal. Did you know about this? She demanded. Shook my head, still trying to process what I was hearing. No, I had no idea. There must be some mistake, Jack insisted, his voice rising slightly. William and I had discussed succession planning. He understood the importance of experienced management. I'm afraid there's no mistake, Mr. Blackwell said firmly. He turned to me. Tyler, your grandfather left you a personal letter as well. He asked that you read it privately. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in my grandfather's distinctive block handwriting. The remainder of the meeting passed in a blur of legal terminology and logistical details. When it concluded, my mother and Jack immediately requested a private moment with Mr. Blackwell. I left the conference room in a daze, the envelope clutched in my hand. The firm's reception area was empty, except for a young paralegal at the front desk. I found a quiet corner with a small seating area and carefully opened my grandfather's letter. My dear Tyler, if you're reading this, then I've left this world a bit earlier than I'd planned. I'm sorry for that. There were still so many. Sunday lunches I was looking forward to. You're probably shocked by what you've just learned. I wish I could see your face right now. You always did have the most expressive eyes, just like your father. I need you to understand why I've made this decision. Cascade Industries isn't just a company to me. It's my life's work, built on principles of innovation, precision, and integrity. These are values I see in you every day. I know you wanted to make your own way, and I've always respected that. But the truth is, Cascade Industries needs you, your vision, your technical understanding, and most importantly, your character. The company is at a crossroads. Manufacturing is changing rapidly. The future belongs to those who can reimagine what manufacturing technology can achieve. And that's you, Tyler. There will be resistance. Your mother has never understood the business, and Jack has always seen. It is nothing more than a balance sheet. They'll tell you you're not ready. Don't believe them. In my private study at home, the one with the drafting table, you'll find a hidden safe behind the framed blueprint of our first factory. The combination is your birthday. Inside is everything you'll need. Documents, contacts, and information that will help you understand not just the company, but why this transition must happen now. I've arranged for support. Margaret Wilson, my executive assistant, knows everything about the day-to-day operations. Robert Chen, our chief operations officer, is brilliant and trustworthy. And Thomas Blackwell has complete legal documentation for anything you might need. Remember what I've always told you. Build things that matter. Cascade Industries is my legacy, but now it's yours. Make it matter even more. I love you, Tyler. More than you'll ever know. Grandpa. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope, trying to collect myself before my mother and Jack emerged from their meeting. My phone buzzed with a text message from Margaret Wilson, my grandfather's assistant. Your grandfather instructed me to reach out after the will reading. When you're ready to talk, I'm here. A lot happened in his final months that you should know about. I was about to respond when my mother and Jack appeared, their faces set in identical expressions of determination. We need to discuss this situation, my mother said. This isn't what your grandfather would have wanted if he'd been thinking clearly. We're headed back to the house, Jack added. We can talk there. The drive to my grandfather's sprawling colonial home in Lexington was tense and silent. My grandmother had passed away 3 years earlier, and my grandfather had continued living there alone, refusing all suggestions that he downsize or move to a retirement community. As we entered the familiar foyer with its sweeping staircase, memories of childhood visits washed over me. The house had been my sanctuary after my father died, the place where I felt most understood and accepted. In the living room, my mother wasted no time. Tyler, you need to be reasonable about this. Running a $150 million company isn't something you can just step into without experience. Your mother's right, Jack said, adopting the patient tone he used when explaining business realities. Cascade Industries employs over 250 people. The responsibility is enormous. I thought of my grandfather's letter, tucked safely in my jacket pocket. Grandpa seemed to think I could handle it. Your grandfather was a brilliant engineer, Jack said, but not always practical about business matters. He was thinking with his heart, not his head. My mother sat beside me on the sofa. We have a solution that respects your grandfather's wishes while ensuring the company's stability. Jack will assume the CEO position temporarily, with you learning the business as his deputy. After a few years, when you're ready, you can step into the role. The rehearsed quality of their proposal made it clear they had planned this response, well before the will was even read. I wondered how long they had known or suspected what my grandfather intended. "That's not what Grandpa wanted," I said quietly. "What William wanted isn't practical," Jack insisted, his patience visibly thinning. "The board won't accept an inexperienced 28-year-old as CEO. The shareholders will panic. Stock prices will plummet." "The controlling interest is mine," I reminded him. "The decision isn't up to the board." "Be reasonable, Tyler," my mother snapped, her composure slipping. "You've never even worked at Cascade Industries. You don't know the first thing about running it." I stood up, suddenly needing space. "I need time to think. I'm going to stay here tonight." "At the house?" my mother asked, surprised. "Why?" "I want to feel close to Grandpa," I said, which was true, though not my primary motivation. "And I need to process everything that's happened today." Greg and my mother exchanged glances. "Fine," my mother finally said. "We'll come back tomorrow morning. But Tyler, please think carefully about what we've discussed. This isn't just about what you want. It's about what's best for everyone involved." After they left, the house felt eerily quiet. I wandered through the rooms, touching familiar objects, my grandfather's collection of vintage machine tools, the family photos on the mantelpiece, the worn leather chair where he used to read engineering journals. Eventually, I made my way to his private study at the back of the house. Unlike his corporate office downtown, which was modern and minimalist, this space reflected his true personality. Walls lined with blueprints and technical drawings, shelves overflowing with engineering books, and in the center, a large drafting table permanently covered with projects in progress. I found the framed blueprint of the first Cascade Industries factory, hanging exactly where my grandfather had indicated in his letter. Behind it was a small wall safe. I entered my birthday, and the door swung open. Inside was a thick manila envelope labeled simply "For Tyler" and a leather-bound journal. I carried both to the drafting table and carefully opened the envelope first. What spilled out would change everything I thought I knew about my family, Cascade Industries, and the battle that was clearly just beginning. The documents told a story that made my grandfather's urgency suddenly clear. Financial records showing systematic embezzlement from one of Cascade Industries' subsidiary companies. Email correspondence revealing confidential designs being leaked to competitors. And most damning of all, evidence that someone had been secretly negotiating to sell Cascade's proprietary manufacturing technology to a foreign conglomerate. The evidence all pointed to one person, my stepfather, Jack Reynolds. My grandfather had discovered Jack's activities 8 months earlier and had been quietly building a case, working with trusted executives and outside investigators. He hadn't confronted Jack immediately, wanting ironclad proof before taking action. The final document in the file was dated just 2 weeks before my grandfather's death, a half-completed formal complaint to the SEC and FBI. I sat back, my mind reeling. This wasn't just about succession planning or my grandfather's faith in my abilities. This was about protecting the company from someone who had been systematically betraying it from within. The leather journal contained my grandfather's private thoughts as he uncovered each piece of the puzzle, his initial disbelief, his concern for my mother, and ultimately his determination to expose Jack's actions, whatever the personal cost. The final entry was dated the day before his heart attack. Meeting with Thomas tomorrow to finalize changes to the will. Tyler is the only one I trust to protect what we've built. He has his father's integrity and his own brilliant mind. I've arranged everything to give him the support he'll need. I only hope I've given him enough time to prepare before Jack realizes what I've discovered. I closed the journal, a cold clarity settling over me. My grandfather hadn't died simply leaving me company. He'd left me a mission. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Margaret Wilson. "Your grandfather told me you might need these tonight. There's a board meeting scheduled for Friday. Jack has already reached out to several members." Attached was a file containing detailed profiles of each board member, including personal notes from my grandfather about their loyalties, motivations, and voting histories. I texted back, "I'll be at the office first thing tomorrow. We need to talk." As I prepared for bed in my old room at my grandparents' house, I realized the magnitude of what lay ahead. I wasn't just fighting for control of a company. I was fighting to protect my grandfather's legacy from the man who had potentially caused his death. Because one thing was becoming increasingly clear as I connected the dots: the stress of discovering Jack's betrayal had likely contributed to my grandfather's heart attack. I pulled out my grandfather's letter and read it again, drawing strength from his words. "Build things that matter," he had written. But Cascade Industries wasn't just a collection of machines and patents. It was a vision for American manufacturing, one that Jack Reynolds was willing to sell to the highest bidder. Tomorrow would be the first day of a battle I hadn't asked for but couldn't walk away from. My mother, the board, and Jack himself all thought I was unprepared and would easily relinquish control to more experienced hands. They had severely underestimated the grandson of William Harrison, and they were about to discover exactly how much. I barely slept that night, my mind racing through everything I'd discovered. At 5 a.m., I gave up trying and made a pot of the strong black coffee my grandfather favored. Sitting at his drafting table, I began organizing what I knew and planning my first moves. By 6:30 a.m., I was dressed in one of the emergency business suits I kept at my grandparents' house, a charcoal gray ensemble that I hoped conveyed both competence and authority. I'd need every advantage today. The Cascade Industries headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a building in downtown Boston. The lobby featured a display of the company's first successful industrial robot arm, my grandfather's breakthrough innovation from 1987 that had transformed the business. I'd visited the building countless times growing up, but today was different. As I approached the security desk, the guard, a longtime employee named Steve, did a double take. "Mr. Harrison, I didn't expect to see you here today." "Good morning, Steve. I'll be coming in regularly now. Could I get my access credentials updated?" Steve hesitated. I would need authorization for that. Maybe you could check with Mr. Reynolds. He was here earlier and mentioned he'd be handling company transitions." So Jack had already begun, establishing his authority. "Steve, are you familiar with my grandfather's will?" I asked calmly. He shook his head. "I am now the majority shareholder and appointed CEO of Cascade Industries. You can verify this with Thomas Blackwell at Blackwell & Associates if you need to. But I require immediate access to all areas of this building, including my grandfather's office." Steve's eyes widened. After a brief phone call to legal, he quickly processed my new access card with obvious embarrassment. "I'm sorry for the confusion, Mr. Harrison." As I rode the elevator to the executive floor, I mentally prepared for my meeting with Margaret Wilson. My grandfather's executive assistant had been with him for over 15 years and knew the company inside and out. If anyone could help me navigate the minefield ahead, it would be her. Margaret was waiting when I stepped off the elevator, a composed woman in her mid-50s with copper hair streaked with silver and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Tyler," she said warmly, extending her hand, "your grandfather would be pleased you're here so promptly." "Thank you for reaching out last night," I replied, shaking her hand. "I'm still trying to process everything." She nodded understandingly. "We have much to discuss, but not here. Your grandfather's office is this way." She led me down a corridor lined with awards and patents from Cascade's most significant innovations. At the end was a set of double doors leading to my grandfather's executive suite. The office was exactly as I remembered it from my last visit a month ago, spacious and bright with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Boston Harbor. One wall displayed manufacturing awards and recognitions. Another held a massive digital screen for reviewing technical designs. In the center was a large desk of polished maple, and beyond that, a conference area with a round table where my grandfather had preferred to work. "No one has touched anything," Margaret assured me, closing the door behind us. "Your grandfather was very specific about that possibility." "What possibility?" "That he might not have time to handle the Jack situation himself." She gestured to the conference table. "Please sit. We don't have much time before the executive team meeting at 9 die." "Executive team meeting?" "I wasn't notified about that." Margaret's expression tightened. "Jack called it late yesterday after speaking with several board members. He's presenting himself as the interim CEO, with your mother's backing, of course." I set my bag down and took a seat. "Tell me everything, Margaret. What exactly was my grandfather investigating about Jack?" For the next 45 minutes, Margaret filled in the gaps of what I'd discovered in my grandfather's files. Jack had joined Cascade Industries' executive team 3 years ago, shortly after marrying my mother. Initially, he'd been hired to oversee financial operations for their international distribution, a position my mother had pressured my grandfather to create. "Your grandfather was reluctant," Margaret explained, "but your mother insisted that the company needed someone with Jack's financial expertise. William finally agreed, partly to maintain peace in the family. Over time, Jack had expanded his influence, particularly in the company's automation technology division, the area developing proprietary manufacturing systems that made Cascade Industries an industry leader. 8 months ago, Margaret had noticed discrepancies in financial reporting from one of the subsidiaries under Jack's supervision. She'd alerted my grandfather, triggering his private investigation. What he found disturbed him deeply, Margaret said, her voice lowering. Jack had been systematically siphoning both money and intellectual property. "We believe he's been working with Global Precision Technologies." "The German manufacturing conglomerate?" I asked, recognizing the name from industry news. Margaret nodded. "They've been trying to replicate our automation systems for years. Based on what your grandfather uncovered, Jack was planning to sell our proprietary technology directly to them, after positioning himself to take control of the company. But why would he think he could take control? Even if Grandpa had retired, the shares would have gone to the family." "Your mother," Margaret said simply. "Jack convinced her that she should inherit the controlling interest as William's only child. He'd been working on her for years, suggesting that your grandfather was becoming less capable of running the company. I believe the plan was for your mother to inherit and immediately install Jack as CEO. The pieces were falling into place. So when Grandpa changed his will to leave everything to me instead, it derailed their entire plan," Margaret confirmed. "William never told your mother about the investigation. He was gathering evidence before confronting Jack legally, concerned about how it would affect her. And now Jack is trying to get control anyway, despite the will." "Exactly. He's meeting with board members individually, suggesting that your appointment was a sentimental mistake by an aging man who wasn't thinking clearly. He's proposing a compromise where he takes operational control while you maintain ownership." I thought of the documents I'd found in my grandfather's safe. "We have evidence of his embezzlement and corporate espionage. Why not just expose him immediately?" Margaret's expression grew cautious. "The evidence is compelling but not yet conclusive enough for criminal charges. Your grandfather was still building the case." She leaned forward. "More importantly, exposing Jack publicly right now would create a scandal that could destabilize the company and alarm clients. Stock prices would plummet. Tyler, your grandfather believed the best strategy was to secure your position first, then deal with Jack from a position of strength. That's why he left you detailed instructions about the board." I pulled out my phone and opened the board member profiles Margaret had sent. "So the executive team is meeting this morning. Is that Jack's first move to establish control? He'll present himself as the natural interim leader during this difficult transition. He's expecting you to be unprepared and overwhelmed." A flash of determination cut through my anxiety. Then let's make sure I'm neither of those things. For the next 30 minutes, Margaret gave me a crash course on Cascade Industries' current projects, financial position, and organizational structure. Robert Chen, the COO my grandfather had mentioned in his letter, was traveling in Chicago but would return tomorrow. Of the 11 executive team members, Margaret believed 6 would support me if I demonstrated confidence. 3 were firmly aligned, with Jack, and 2 remained unknown. At 8:45, Margaret handed me a tablet with the company's latest quarterly results. "One more thing your grandfather wanted you to know," she said. "The automated manufacturing technology that Jack was planning to sell is worth far more than even our board realizes. William completed the final patents last month. It's not just an improvement on existing systems, it's revolutionary. The right development partner could make it the new industry standard. And Global Precision would pay anything to get it," I realized. Exactly, which is why Jack is so desperate to gain control. A sharp knock interrupted us. The door opened, before either of us could respond, revealing Jack standing there in an impeccably tailored suit, his expression shifting from confidence to surprise when he saw me. "Tyler," he said, recovering quickly. "I didn't expect to see you here this morning." He turned to Margaret. "Why wasn't I informed that Miss Harrison was in the building?" Margaret rose calmly. "As Mr. Harrison's executive assistant, and now, Mr. Tyler Harrison's, I wasn't aware I needed to report his movements to you, Mr. Reynolds." Jack's jaw tightened momentarily. "Of course. Tyler, I was just coming to prepare for the executive meeting. Your mother mentioned you were staying at William's house last night, so I assumed you were still there." "I wanted to get an early start," I replied, rising from my seat. "I understand you've called an executive team meeting. As the new CEO, I appreciate the initiative, but in the future, I'd prefer to be consulted on scheduling." The statement hung in the air between us. Jack's expression remained pleasant, but a muscle twitched in his cheek. "Tyler, I think there's been a misunderstanding. While William's wishes regarding ownership are clear, the operational leadership of Cascade Industries requires immediate attention. The board and I have discussed a transition plan that would— The board doesn't determine the CEO position when there's a controlling shareholder," I interrupted, my voice calmer than I felt. "But I'm happy to discuss transition plans with them directly. Shall we head to the meeting?" Jack's eyes narrowed slightly, but his smile remained fixed. "Of course." The executive conference room was already filled when we arrived. 10 people sat around a large table, conversations stopping abruptly as I entered with Jack and Margaret. I recognized most of the faces from company events over the years, though I'd never worked directly with any of them. Jack immediately took control, stepping forward to make introductions. "Everyone, you know Tyler Harrison, William's grandson. He's joining us this morning to observe as we discuss the transition plan." "Actually," I said, moving to the head of the table where my grandfather had always sat, "I'm here as Cascade Industries' new chief executive officer, as specified in my grandfather's will. I appreciate everyone making time for this meeting during what I know is a difficult period of adjustment for all of us." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Several executives exchanged glances, while others studied me with newfound interest. Jack remained standing at the opposite end of the table, his expression carefully controlled. "Tyler," he began, using the patient voice that always made me feel like a child. "Everyone here respects William's wishes, but leadership transitions in companies of this size require careful planning. Your grandfather's passing was unexpected, and immediate decisions need to be made." "I agree completely," I said, opening the tablet Margaret had prepared for me, "which is why I've spent the morning reviewing our current project status and quarterly projections. I'd like to start by addressing the production delays at the Milwaukee facility and the automation system implementation for the Boeing contract." The next 2 hours were among the most challenging of my life. I drew on everything I knew about Cascade Industries from my lifelong conversations with my grandfather, as well as my own engineering expertise. When technical questions arose about projects, I handled them confidently. This was, after all, my professional field. When financial or operational questions came up that I couldn't answer fully, I deferred to the appropriate team member or promised to address the issue in individual follow-ups. Jack attempted several times to undermine my authority, highlighting areas where decisions had been pending before my grandfather's death and suggesting they needed immediate resolution that perhaps I wasn't prepared to provide. Each time, I redirected the conversation, demonstrating knowledge where I had it and delegating where appropriate. By the meeting's end, the room's energy had shifted subtly. Not everyone was convinced, but I could see that some of the skepticism had turned to cautious acceptance. I wasn't the unprepared grandson they'd expected. "Thank you all for your time and insights," I concluded. "I'll be scheduling individual meetings with each of you over the next few days to better understand your departments and priorities. In the meantime, all major decisions will continue to require executive approval, mine specifically. Margaret, we'll distribute the updated authorization protocols this afternoon." As the team filed out, several members stopped to introduce themselves more personally or offer condolences about my grandfather. Jack remained seated, his expression unreadable as he watched these interactions. My mother, who had texted me repeatedly throughout the meeting, would be furious when she learned how it had gone. When only Jack, Margaret, and I remained, Jack finally spoke. "That was an impressive performance, Tyler. William would have been proud of your determination." "It wasn't a performance, Jack. I'm taking the responsibility my grandfather entrusted to me seriously." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You know your mother is very concerned about the stress this is placing on you. She only wants what's best for the company and for you. I appreciate her concern, but I'm capable of determining what's best for myself. As for the company, that was my grandfather's decision to make." Jack's facade of concern hardened slightly. "William made that decision without consulting the family or the board. It puts everyone in a difficult position." "The only person in a difficult position," I replied evenly, "is someone who expected to take control of a company that was never theirs to claim." Something dangerous flashed in Jack's eyes before his expression smoothed again. "I see Margaret has been sharing William's perspectives. I'd be careful about forming opinions based on an assistant's gossip." Margaret, who had been quietly organizing notes at the side of the room, looked up sharp. Jack rose from his chair, buttoning his jacket. "This isn't over, Tyler. The board meeting is Friday, and several members have serious concerns about inexperienced leadership during this critical time. I suggest you think carefully about what's truly best for Cascade Industries." After he left, Margaret approached the table. "That went better than expected for your first day." I exhaled slowly, finally allowing myself to feel the tension that had been building. "Maybe, but Friday's board meeting will be the real test, and Jack isn't going to waste time before then." "No, he won't," she agreed. "He'll be working with the board members individually, particularly the three who have consistently supported him: Winters, Blackwell, and Sanchez." I opened the board profiles again. "Then I need to speak with the others first, especially those my grandfather indicated." "We're solidly in his corner." Margaret nodded. "I'll arrange meetings immediately. But Tyler, there's something else you should be prepared for." "What's that?" "Your mother. Jack will tell her exactly how this meeting went, and she'll be here soon." I thought about my relationship with my mother, the distance that had grown between us after my father died, her quick remarriage to Jack, and her gradual alignment with his worldview. She hadn't just remarried. She had reconstructed her entire identity around her new husband's ambitions. "I need to speak with Robert Chen as soon as he returns from Chicago," I said, refocusing on immediate priorities. "And I want to review all communication between Jack's office and Global Precision Technologies for the past year. I'll have IT pull those records, but Jack will be notified of the request." "Good," I said, making my decision. "Let him know. It's time he understands that I'm not just sitting in this chair temporarily. Margaret smiled slightly. Your grandfather said you had steel in your spine. I'm beginning to see it. As if on cue, my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I need an hour before I speak with her, I told Margaret. Tell her I'm in meetings until noon. After she left, I turned to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Looking out at the Boston skyline my grandfather had helped shape through the advanced manufacturing equipment his company provided. Buildings that would outlast all of us, as he used to say. The weight of responsibility settled over me, not just for the company and its employees, but for my grandfather's vision of what American manufacturing could accomplish. Innovative systems that prioritized precision and quality over mere cost-cutting. Designs that maintained manufacturing jobs in the United States rather than outsourcing them. Jack saw Cascade Industries as nothing more than a valuable asset to be controlled and eventually sold off in pieces to the highest bidder. My mother saw it as a status symbol and source of wealth. But my grandfather had seen it, and now I saw it too, as something far more important. A legacy of American ingenuity worth fighting for. My mother arrived exactly at noon, as if she'd been waiting in her car for Margaret's go-ahead. When she swept into what was now my office, her expression was a mixture of indignation and concern that I'd seen countless times growing up. It was the look that typically preceded a lecture about my impractical choices. Tyler, what do you think you're doing? She demanded, setting her designer handbag on the conference table with enough force to make a statement. Jack just called me. You've completely blindsided everyone. I gestured to one of the chairs. Would you like to sit down, Mom? I don't want to sit down. I want an explanation. We agreed to discuss this situation as a family before any decisions were made. No, I corrected her, keeping my voice level. You and Jack presented a plan that ignored Grandpa's explicit wishes. That's not an agreement. My mother's perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. This company isn't some tech startup where you can design clever gadgets. It's a complex international business with hundreds of employees and millions in contracts. Jack is trying to help you. Jack is trying to help himself, I replied. And I think you know that deep down. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's unfair and untrue. Jack has been nothing but supportive of this family. He's the one who encouraged your father to expand internationally, which doubled the company's value. He's the one who modernized the financial systems. He's the one who's been embezzling from the automation technology division and negotiating to sell our proprietary systems to Global Precision Technologies. I finished for her. The color drained from my mother's face. What are you talking about? That's absurd. I opened my drawer and removed copies of some of the documents I'd found in my grandfather's safe. Bank transfers, emails, meeting notes, and slid them across the desk. Grandpa had been investigating Jack for months. That's why he changed his will to leave the company to me instead of you. He knew Jack would take control if you inherited. My mother stared at the papers without touching them. These could be anything. Context can be manipulated. Mom, I said gently, Grandpa hired professional investigators. There's more evidence being compiled. Jack has been systematically betraying this company and this family. She finally picked up one of the documents, an email from Jack to someone at Global Precision discussing transfer of proprietary systems and compensation arrangements. Her hand trembled slightly. I don't believe it, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Jack he couldn't. The evidence is there. Grandpa was preparing to confront him legally when he died. My mother's eyes snapped up to meet mine. Are you suggesting Jack had something to do with your father's death? Because that's going too far, Tyler. I'm not suggesting murder, if that's what you mean. But the stress of discovering Jack's betrayal absolutely contributed to Grandpa's heart attack. His journal entries make that clear. She set the paper down and straightened her posture, visibly pulling herself together. Even if there are financial irregularities, that doesn't mean Jack isn't still the best person to run this company. Business is complicated, Tyler. Sometimes, things that look unethical from the outside are standard industry practices. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Selling company secrets to competitors is never standard practice. It's corporate espionage and possibly faces federal charges depending on the technology involved. You're being dramatic, my mother snapped, reverting to her dismissive tone. This is exactly why you're not ready for this position. You see everything, in black and white terms. The real world has nuance. The real world has laws, Mom. Laws that Jack has broken. We stared at each other across the desk, the gulf between us wider than it had ever been. I suddenly realized how little I knew this woman who had given birth to me. After my father died, she had retreated into herself, emerging months later with a new identity centered around Jack and his world of corporate achievement. The mother who had once helped me with science fair projects and attended every robotics competition had disappeared long ago. "What are you planning to do?" she finally asked, her voice cooler now. "Run the company as Grandpa intended, protect his legacy and the innovations he worked his entire life to develop." "And Jack?" I held her gaze steadily. "That depends on him. If he resigns quietly, we might be able to handle this without criminal charges. If he continues trying to undermine me and steal company assets, I'll have no choice but to pursue legal action." My mother gathered her handbag and stood. "You've always been stubborn, just like your father, and just like him, you don't see the practical realities of life." She paused at the door. "Jack isn't your enemy, Tyler, and I'm still your mother. Don't forget that." After she left, I sat, motionless for several minutes, processing the conversation. My mother hadn't explicitly sided with Jack, but she hadn't accepted the evidence against him either. She was in denial, unwilling to face what her husband had done, or what it said, about her judgment in trusting him. A gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. Margaret entered with a concerned expression. "Your mother just left." She looked upset. "She is upset," I confirmed. "I showed her some of the evidence against Jack. She's in denial." Margaret nodded sympathetically. "That's understandable. No one wants to believe someone they love is capable of betrayal." She set a folder on my desk. "Robert Chen's flight lands at 4:30. He'll come directly to the office. And I've arranged meetings with board members Michaels and Wilson for tomorrow morning." "Thank you. What about the IT records I requested?" Margaret's expression grew more serious. "There's a complication. When I submitted the request for Jack's communications with Global Precision, IT informed me that Jack initiated a comprehensive data purge of his email and files 3 days ago, the day after your grandfather's funeral." My stomach tightened. "He's destroying evidence." "It appears so. Fortunately, Cascade Industries has robust backup systems that even executives can't fully access. IT is working on retrieving the deleted communications, but it will take time. We may not have time." "What about the automation technology division? Are the patents and research secure?" "The formal patents are filed and protected, but the latest research and development materials—" Margaret hesitated. "We should speak with Nathan Brooks. He heads the division and worked closely with your grandfather on the newest innovations." I checked the time, just past 1 p.m. "Set up a meeting with him today if possible. And I need full access to the company's financial records, particularly any transactions Jack has authorized in the past year." "The CFO will resist that request without board approval," Margaret warned. "Andrew Peters has worked closely with Jack since he joined the company." Another complication. "Then we'll need to approach this differently. Who handles the actual financial record keeping? Not the CFO, but the people who process the day-to-day transactions." "That would be Samantha Reeves in accounting. She's been with the company for nearly 15 years. Is she trustworthy?" Margaret considered the question. "Your grandfather thought so." She flagged some discrepancies in the automation division's budget last year, which is partly what triggered his investigation. Then let's start there. Arrange a meeting with Samantha this afternoon before Robert arrives. The rest of the day became a crash course in corporate detective work. Samantha Reeves turned out to be a meticulous accountant with a deep institutional knowledge of Cascade Industries' financial systems. When I explained that I was continuing my grandfather's internal review, she readily shared her concerns about irregular fund transfers and unusual consultant payments that had begun shortly after Jack joined the company. The patterns became more obvious in the last year, Samantha explained, showing me spreadsheets where she had highlighted suspicious transactions. Consulting fees to companies that don't seem to exist, research budget allocations that never reach the actual researchers, international wire transfers with minimal documentation. Why didn't you report these to the CFO? I asked. Samantha's expression turned guarded. I did initially. Mr. Peters said he would handle it, but nothing changed. In fact, the irregular payments increased. That's when I went directly to your grandfather. By the time Robert Chen arrived from Chicago, I had compiled a disturbing financial trail that corroborated much of what my grandfather had discovered. Robert, a manufacturing operations expert in his early 50s who had been my grandfather's right hand for the past decade, provided the perspective I needed on how deeply the company had been compromised. Your grandfather believed Jack had at least 2 other executives working with him, Robert explained as we reviewed the evidence in my office after hours. Andrew Peters in finance is definitely one. The other is likely either Winters or Sanchez on the board. So I'm facing opposition not just from Jack, but from an embedded network, I said, the magnitude of the challenge becoming clearer. Robert nodded gravely. Cascade Industries isn't just a company, Tyler. The automated manufacturing technology your grandfather developed could revolutionize how we produce precision components. It has applications beyond industrial equipment, medical devices, aerospace components, even specialized military applications. The intellectual property alone is worth billions with the right development partner. And Global Precision Technologies wants exclusive control, I said, understanding why Jack had targeted this specific technology. Exactly. They've been trying to replicate Williams' innovations for years without success. Buying the technology directly would give them an unassailable market advantage, especially in the aerospace and defense sectors where Cascade has focused our recent development. The implications were staggering, far beyond what I had initially understood. This wasn't just about control of a successful manufacturing company. It was about the future of American technological competitiveness in critical industries. The board meeting is in 2 days, I said, refocusing on immediate concerns. Jack has been working on them individually. How many do you think will support? Me? Robert considered the question carefully. With the evidence we have now, maybe 5 of the 11. It's not just about the facts, Tyler. These are relationships built over years. Some board members have known Jack socially for decades. They've golfed together, vacationed together. Their spouses are friends with your mother. And I'm the unknown grandson who designs robots but has never run a company, I added wryly. You're also William Harrison's chosen successor, Robert reminded. Me. That carries significant weight with the old guard who respected your grandfather. The key will be convincing them that you're not just a placeholder, but a genuine leader with a vision for the company's future. Our strategy session was interrupted by Margaret, who entered with an expression of barely contained alarm. We have a problem, she announced. Jack just called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. He can't do that, I protested. I'm the CEO. Technically, any 3 board members can call an emergency meeting with 24 hours' notice. Jack has convinced Winters, Sanchez, and Peters that there's an urgent leadership crisis requiring immediate action. Robert swore under his breath. They're moving faster than we anticipated. This is about getting a board vote on interim leadership before we can secure enough support. Can they actually remove me as CEO? I asked, trying to understand the corporate governance implications. Not permanently, since you hold the controlling shares, Robert clarified. But they could vote for a temporary leadership structure citing extraordinary circumstances, especially if they present evidence that the company is at immediate risk. What kind of evidence? Margaret and Robert exchanged glances. They don't need much, Margaret said carefully. Just enough to justify emergency action. A concerning financial report, signs of client instability. Anything that suggests the company requires experienced leadership immediately. They'll manufacture something, Robert added. The question is what, and how credible will it be? I thought about the information we'd gathered throughout the day. If they're moving this aggressively, they must be worried about what we've discovered. Let's use that. I turned to Margaret. Contact every board member right now. Tell them I've uncovered significant financial irregularities that will be presented at tomorrow's meeting, and that it's imperative they attend in person, not by proxy. What financial irregularities will you present? Robert asked. We have suspicions and patterns, but not definitive proof yet. We have enough to raise serious questions, I said, thinking through the strategy. We don't need to prove criminal activity tomorrow. We just need to create enough doubt about Jack's management to prevent them from installing him as interim CEO. I turned to Margaret. We need Nathan Brooks from the automation division first thing tomorrow, and Samantha from accounting. They both need to be prepared to present their concerns directly to the board. Margaret nodded and left to make the arrangements. Robert remained, studying me with newfound respect. You know, William told me once that you had better instincts for this business than anyone realized, including yourself. I hope he was right, I said, feeling the weight of tomorrow's confrontation. Because I'm making this up as I go. Robert smiled slightly. That's how most good leaders operate, especially in a crisis. The difference is whether they admit it. After Robert left, I remained in the office reviewing everything we'd gathered and preparing for tomorrow's showdown. Around midnight, as I was organizing my presentation materials, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Be careful who you trust. Not everyone at Cascade is who they appear to be. Some of your grandfather's allies have already switched sides. The cryptic warning sent a chill through me. I tried calling the number, but it went straight to voicemail with no identifying message. I forwarded the text to Robert with a question mark. His response came quickly. Keep this to yourself for now. We'll discuss it in the morning. I barely slept that night on the small couch in my grandfather's office, my mind cycling through possible scenarios for the morning's meeting. By 6 a.m., I was already reviewing financial documents with Samantha, who had arrived early at my request. Nathan Brooks joined us at 7, bringing detailed records of the automation division's research and development activities, and disturbing news. Someone accessed the secure server containing our latest test results last night, he reported, his expression grave. The access was authorized using Jack's credentials, but at 2 a.m., when he was supposedly in New York meeting with investors. What exactly was accessed? I asked. Everything, Nathan said simply. The entire development roadmap for the next generation systems, test results, application schematics, even the market analysis predicting potential revenue streams. They're preparing to move the technology, Samantha realized, downloading everything before they lose access. The pieces clicked into place. That's why they moved up the board meeting. This isn't just about removing me. They're planning to transfer the technology immediately after securing control. Robert arrived as we were discussing this latest development. I've been making calls since 5 a.m., he reported. The board is split almost evenly, but Michaels and Wilson are wavering. They respect your grandfather, but are concerned about stability. Then we need to show them the real threat to stability isn't me. It's Jack, I said, a plan forming. Samantha, can you access the server logs showing last night's download activity? Yes, but I'd need IT authorization, she replied. Make it happen, I directed Robert. We need those logs at the meeting. As 9 a.m. approached, I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind of clarity that comes from knowing a confrontation is inevitable and necessary. I chose my grandfather's favorite conference room for the meeting rather than the formal boardroom, a subtle but deliberate choice. This was where he had made his most important decisions, surrounded by models of his greatest manufacturing innovations. Board members began arriving at 8:45. I greeted each one personally, noting who seemed uncomfortable meeting my eyes and who offered genuine condolences about my grandfather. Jack arrived last with my mother surprisingly in tow, both impeccably dressed and projecting absolute confidence. "Tyler," Jack acknowledged with a tight smile. "I see you've chosen an unconventional venue for a board meeting. My grandfather believed important decisions should be made in spaces that remind us of our purpose," I replied. "The models in this room represent the innovation that built Cascade Industries." "How sentimental," my mother commented, her tone dismissive. "Business decisions should be based on practical realities, not nostalgia." I met her gaze directly. "I couldn't agree more about practical realities, Mom." The emergency board meeting began with Jack attempting to seize control from the outset. "Thank you all for making time on such short notice," he began smoothly, standing at the end of the conference table. "As you know, we face an unprecedented situation with William's unexpected passing and his unconventional succession plan. I've called this meeting to address immediate concerns about company stability during this transition." Before he could continue, I spoke up from my position at the head of the table. "Actually, Mr. Reynolds, while you may have requested this meeting, as CEO, I'll be conducting it." A flicker of annoyance crossed Jack's face before his professional mask returned. "Of course, Tyler, though I think we're getting ahead of ourselves regarding titles. That's precisely what we're here to clarify today." Board member Winters, a silver-haired investment banker who had consistently supported Jack, cleared his throat. "With respect, Mr. Harrison, your grandfather's wishes notwithstanding, the board has a fiduciary responsibility to ensure capable leadership during this critical time." "I couldn't agree more, Mr. Winters," I replied. "Which is why I've spent the past 36 hours conducting a comprehensive review of the company's current operations, including some concerning findings I'd like to present before we discuss anything else." I nodded to Robert, who distributed folders to each board member. These materials outline multiple financial irregularities discovered in our automation technology division over the past year. Samantha Reeves from accounting and Nathan Brooks from automation are here to provide context. Jack's expression hardened. "This is highly irregular, Tyler. The agenda for this emergency meeting is addressing immediate threats to company stability," I finished for him. "I believe systematic financial misconduct qualifies." For the next 30 minutes, Samantha Reeves presented her financial findings to the board with remarkable clarity. She methodically walked through the suspicious transactions, highlighting patterns that couldn't be explained by normal business operations. Nathan Brooks followed with an overview of the automation division's breakthroughs and the systematic attempts to access restricted data. "Last night's server breach is particularly concerning," Nathan explained, displaying the server logs on the conference room screen. "These logs clearly show a complete download of our proprietary algorithms, the core of our next-generation manufacturing systems. The access originated from Mr. Reynolds' credentials at 2:17 a.m., while he was supposedly in New York." Jack had remained surprisingly composed throughout the presentations. When they concluded, he smiled slightly and addressed the board with absolute confidence. "I appreciate Tyler's enthusiasm in his new role, but what you've just seen is a perfect example of why experience matters in leadership positions." He produced his own folder and began distributing documents. These financial transfers were all authorized as part of our international partnership strategy, which I presented to this board last quarter. The consulting fees were for specialized security testing on our systems, tests that Tyler's selective presentation conveniently omitted. He turned to Nathan. "As for the server access, yes, I was reviewing our automation research remotely while in New York. My assistant can confirm I was working late in my hotel room preparing for today's investor meetings. Each explanation sounded reasonable, particularly to board members unfamiliar with the technical details. I could see uncertainty replacing the alarm on several faces. Furthermore, Jack continued smoothly, these baseless accusations highlight exactly why we need experienced leadership during this transition. Tyler is understandably emotional after his grandfather's passing and eager to assert authority, but his actions demonstrate a concerning impulsiveness and lack of corporate understanding. My mother, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. I love my son, but I have to agree with Jack. Tyler has always been headstrong, just like his father was. William indulged that quality, but as a CEO, it creates unnecessary risk. The personal attack from my own mother stunned me momentarily. Before I could respond, Robert intervened. With respect, Mrs. Reynolds, these aren't baseless accusations. The server logs clearly show full system access and complete data extraction, far beyond what would be needed for casual review. And the transfers to Global Precision's subsidiary companies are part of our preliminary discussions for potential joint ventures in Europe, Jack interrupted. Completely standard in international business development and fully disclosed in my quarterly reports. Board member Wilson, whom I'd hoped would support me, looked troubled. Tyler, these are serious allegations. Do you have conclusive evidence that these activities weren't legitimate business operations? I hesitated. The evidence was compelling but circumstantial. Patterns of behavior that pointed to misconduct but didn't definitively prove criminal. Intent. My grandfather had been still building his case when he died. Jack seized on my momentary silence. He doesn't, because there isn't any. This is exactly the kind of governance risk I'm concerned about, making accusations without proper investigation or understanding of complex business relationships. That's rich coming from you, I said, my composure finally slipping. Considering you've been systematically undermining this company for your own benefit since you joined. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. I'd crossed the line from professional concern into personal accusation, and everyone felt it. Board member Michaels, one of my grandfather's oldest friends, spoke gently. Tyler, we all understand this is a difficult time. Perhaps it would be best if we took a short recess before continuing. I recognized the suggestion for what it was, a chance for me to regain my composure. I nodded stiffly, and the board members filed out, leaving me alone with Robert and Margaret. That could have gone better, Robert said quietly. He was prepared for everything, I replied, frustration evident in my voice. It's like he knew exactly what we would present. Margaret's expression was grave. He may have. Remember that text you received last night? Someone inside the company could be feeding him information. The thought was unsettling. So what now? He's managed to make me look emotional and unprepared, exactly as he planned. We need something definitive, Robert said. Something that can't be explained away as normal business operations. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan, who had left immediately after his presentation. Server room ASAP. Found something. I need to go, I told Robert and Margaret. Stall the board. If they return before I do. I found Nathan in the company's main server room, frantically working at a terminal while the IT director, Marcus Reed, looked over his shoulder with an expression of growing alarm. What did you find? I asked. Marcus turned to me. Mr. Harrison, we've identified the source of last night's data extraction. It wasn't just a download. It was a complete mirroring of our proprietary technology database to an external server. Can you trace where it went? That's the thing, Nathan said, pointing to the screen. The destination was masked, but not completely. We found fragments of the receiving address. He highlighted a sequence of numbers and letters. This IP address range belongs to a server farm in Berlin, commonly used by Global Precision Technologies. I finished, recognizing the pattern from my cybersecurity coursework. Marcus nodded grimly. After seeing this, I did a deeper scan of our systems. There's evidence of an unauthorized backdoor access point that was created 4 months ago. It would allow someone with the right credentials to extract data without triggering our regular security protocols. When was it created exactly? I asked, a suspicion forming. Marcus checked the logs. February 12th. The day after Grandpa confronted Jack about the financial discrepancies, I said, remembering the timeline from my grandfather's journal. This is it. Proof that he's been extracting company secrets. There's more, Nathan added. I reviewed the project access logs again after the meeting. 3 of our most sensitive automation projects had their security classifications downgraded 6 weeks ago by the CFO, Andrew Peters, making them accessible to more people, including Jack. I realized, and potentially preparing them for transfer to an external partner, Marcus confirmed. The system changes were subtle, but when you know what to look for, this was the definitive evidence we needed, proof that couldn't be explained away as normal business operations. I rushed back to the conference room with Nathan and Marcus, hoping the board hadn't voted in my absence. I returned to find the meeting already resumed, and Jack mid-presentation, standing beside a sleek PowerPoint display showing Cascade Industries' global projects. Which is why a smooth leadership transition is essential to maintaining client confidence, he was saying. I propose a 6-month interim leadership structure with myself as acting CEO, while Tyler works with the executive team to learn the business from the ground up. Several board members were nodding in agreement. My mother sat beside Jack, looking pleased with how the meeting was progressing. I apologize for interrupting, I said firmly. But we have critical new information that affects this discussion. I nodded to Marcus, who quickly connected his laptop to the presentation system. Within moments, the server logs and tracing data filled the screen, along with the security classification changes and the connection to Global Precision. As you can see, I explained, my voice steady, our systems were compromised in a way that can't be explained as routine business operations. Proprietary technology was extracted to servers associated with Global Precision Technologies, and we've discovered unauthorized security changes that exposed our most valuable intellectual property. The room erupted in concerned murmurs. Jack's composed facade finally cracked, his expression darkening as he realized the evidence was damning. "This is absurd," he snapped. "You're manipulating technical data that most people in this room don't understand to create suspicion. These connections are circumstantial at best." Board member Michaels frowned. "Jack, an unauthorized data transfer to a German competitor doesn't sound circumstantial to me." "And the security classification changes?" Wilson asked, his earlier sympathy for Jack now replaced with concern. Jack looked to my mother for support, but even she appeared shaken by the evidence. He switched tactics immediately. "Even if there are security concerns, which I maintain are being misrepresented, that's all the more reason why experienced leadership is essential right now. Tyler has been CEO for precisely 2 days and has already created chaos with unsubstantiated accusations and amateur investigations." Before I could respond, the boardroom doors burst open. 2 men in dark suits entered, followed by a woman who flashed a badge. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," she announced. "I'm Special Agent Sarah Matthews. We have a warrant to seize certain electronic devices and documents related to an ongoing investigation into corporate espionage and wire fraud." The room fell completely silent. Agent Matthews approached Jack directly. "Jack Reynolds, we'd like you to accompany us to answer some questions regarding unauthorized transfers of proprietary technology to foreign entities." Jack's face was drained of color. "This is outrageous. I'm the CFO of this company. You can't just—" "Actually, I'm the CEO," I corrected automatically, still processing the FBI's sudden appearance. "We have a warrant, Mr. Reynolds," Agent Matthews continued impassively. "You can come voluntarily, or we can place you under arrest. Your choice." My mother stood up, visibly shaking. This is ridiculous. My husband is a respected executive. Who authorized this? Agent Matthews glanced at me, briefly before addressing the room. This investigation began based on evidence submitted by William Harrison approximately 6 weeks before his death. We've been building our case since then. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Grandpa hadn't just been gathering evidence. For the company, he'd already taken it to the FBI. The investigation had been in progress all along. As the agents escorted a protesting Jack from the boardroom, the remaining board members sat in stunned silence. My mother looked utterly lost, her carefully constructed world crumbling before her eyes. I think, board member Michaels said finally, breaking the silence, that this emergency meeting has served its purpose, though not in the way some expected. I move that we formally recognize Tyler Harrison as Chief Executive Officer of Cascade Industries, as per Williams' legally executed will. The vote was unanimous. Even Winters and Sanchez, Jack's strongest allies, recognized that opposing me now would associate them with whatever illegal activities the FBI was investigating. As the board members filed out, subdued and shaken, my mother remained seated, staring blankly at the space Jack had occupied. "Did you know?" she asked when we were alone. "Did you know the FBI was investigating?" "No," I answered honestly. I knew Grandpa was building a case, but not that he'd already involved federal authorities. She nodded slightly, still not meeting my eyes. "He never trusted Jack. I thought it was just—" She trailed off. I was so certain I knew better. I didn't know what to say. This woman who had been so quick to dismiss my capabilities, so eager to hand my grandfather's legacy to her husband, now seemed suddenly small and vulnerable. "What happens now?" she asked. "I don't know exactly," I admitted. "The FBI will investigate. Jack will probably be charged. The company will continue operating." "I meant with us," she clarified softly. "What happens with us now, Tyler?" It was the question I wasn't prepared for. Through all my strategizing about the company, I hadn't considered the personal fallout, the broken relationship with my only remaining parent. "I don't know that either," I said finally. The victory over Jack should have felt triumphant. But as I watched my mother struggle to process the betrayal of her husband and her own misjudgment, I felt only a hollow ache. Winning the company had cost me the last fragments of family I had left. In the days that followed, Cascade Industries was rocked by the scandal. The FBI investigation expanded to include Andrew Peters, the CFO, and board member Winters, both implicated in Jack's scheme to sell company technology. Clients called with concerns, employees whispered in corridors, and reporters camped outside the building, hoping for statements. Through it all, I maintained a calm exterior, reassuring stakeholders and directing the executive team through the crisis. But each night alone in my grandfather's house, the weight of everything threatened to crush me. The FBI had seized additional company servers, disrupting ongoing projects. 3 international clients had put their contracts on hold pending resolution of leadership issues. The stock had dropped 14%, and my mother had stopped taking my calls, entirely retreating to a friend's vacation home in Vermont. 1 week after the board meeting, I hit my breaking point. At midnight, sitting in my grandfather's home office, surrounded by crisis management plans and media statements, I finally allowed myself to cry. For the grandfather I'd lost, for the mother who couldn't see past her own pride, for the innocent employees caught in the crossfire of Jack's betrayal, and for the staggering responsibility I now carried alone. The company I'd fought so hard to protect was now more vulnerable than ever. Even with Jack removed, the damage he'd done to our reputation, our client relationships, and our internal cohesion threatened Cascade Industries' survival. I had won the battle for control, only to face a war for the company's very existence. In that moment of despair, staring at a photograph of my grandfather on his desk, I understood why he had chosen me despite my lack of executive experience. This wasn't just about engineering knowledge or business acumen. It was about values, about refusing to surrender, even when victory seemed impossible. What I didn't know then was that the lowest point of my journey had arrived. And as is often true at such moments, help would come from the most unexpected source. The morning after my breakdown, I woke to insistent knocking at the front door. Disoriented and exhausted, I stumbled downstairs in yesterday's clothes to find an unfamiliar older man in a well-worn blazer standing on the porch. "Tyler Harrison?" he asked when I opened the door. "Yes," I replied wearily, conscious of how many reporters had been trying to contact me. "Frank Sullivan." He extended a weathered hand. "I was your grandfather's first business partner. May I come in? I believe I have something that might help you." I hesitated, trying to place the name. My grandfather had mentioned Frank in some of his stories about the early days of Cascade Industries, but I'd never met him. "I can prove it," he said, noting my uncertainty. He pulled out a faded photograph from his wallet and handed it to me. It showed two young men standing in front of a small machine shop with a hand-painted sign, "Harrison and Sullivan Precision Manufacturing." "Grandpa never mentioned you were still in touch," I said, studying the photograph. "We weren't, not directly. Had a falling out in '92 over the direction of the business. I wanted to focus on custom work. William saw bigger possibilities." Frank's expression softened. He was right, of course. Always had the better vision between us, but pride's a stubborn thing. Something in his forthright manner made me decide to trust him. I invited him in, leading him to the kitchen where I desperately needed coffee before any serious conversation. "How did you find me?" I asked as the coffee brewed. "Your grandfather's lawyer, Blackwell, contacted me last week. Said William had left instructions to reach out to me if certain circumstances arose with the company." Frank accepted the mug I offered. "Been following the news? Seems those circumstances have definitely arisen." "That's putting it mildly," I said, taking a seat across from him at the kitchen island. "The FBI investigation has clients panicking. Our stock is plummeting, and I'm trying to convince everyone I'm not completely in over my head." "Are you? In over your head?" The blunt question caught me off guard. After days of projecting confidence to the board, executives, and employees, the temptation to admit my doubts was overwhelming. "Maybe," I admitted. "I know engineering. I understand the technical side of what Cascade creates, but the business politics, the client relationships that took decades to build, the financial intricacies. I'm learning as quickly as I can, but it might not be fast enough to save the company." Frank nodded, seemingly satisfied with my honesty. "William said you'd be like that. Straightforward, no pretense. It's why he chose you. You spoke with him about me recently?" "About 4 months ago, after he first suspected someone was betraying the company." Frank took a sip of coffee. "He called me out of the blue after nearly 30 years. Said he needed perspective from someone who knew the business but wasn't caught up in the current situation." I tried to process this information. "So, Grandpa told you about Jack's embezzlement?" "Some of it. Enough that I wasn't surprised by the FBI showing up at your board meeting." Frank set his mug down and fixed me with a penetrating look. "But I'm not here to discuss what went wrong. I'm here about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "William left something with me for safekeeping, something he didn't want kept in the company records or even with his regular attorney." He reached into his battered leather messenger bag and removed a sealed envelope and a small external hard drive. The complete design and implementation plans for what he called quantum manufacturing. I stared at the hard drive in Frank's weathered hand. "Quantum manufacturing? What is it exactly?" Frank leaned back in his chair. "According to William, it's a completely new approach to automated precision manufacturing. Not just an improvement on existing systems, but a fundamental reimagining of how components are created." I was aware Grandpa was working on something revolutionary, but this is the first I'm hearing of quantum manufacturing. That's by design, Frank said. William kept it completely separate from Cascade's normal R&D channels. After he discovered someone was stealing company information, he moved this project entirely off-site. Worked on it nights and weekends in a small laboratory he set up in an industrial park across town. Used his personal funds, not company resources. So this technology isn't in any of Cascade's official records. Frank shook his head. The patents are filed under a shell company William created, completely separate from Cascade Industries. He was paranoid about keeping it secure, and for good reason, as it turns out. I picked up the hard drive, turning it over in my hands. And he left instructions for you to give this to me if something happened to him? Not exactly, Frank said, a slight smile crossing his face. His instructions were to give it to you if you proved yourself by protecting the company from the threat he'd identified. Said if you couldn't manage that, then you weren't the right person for this either. A test. Even from beyond the grave, my grandfather had been evaluating whether I was worthy of his greatest innovation. So, what exactly is on here? I asked, setting the drive down carefully. Complete blueprints, material specifications, test data, implementation guidelines. Everything needed to bring quantum manufacturing to life. William believed it could reposition Cascade Industries not just as a leading manufacturing firm, but as the company that revolutionized precision engineering for the next century. The potential was staggering and exactly what the company needed to recover from the current crisis, a game-changing innovation that would attract new clients, restore investor confidence, and shift attention away from the scandal. There's something else you should know, Frank added. William wasn't developing this alone. He had a partner, Dr. Eliza Chen at Stanford. She handled the advanced materials aspects, developed new composites and alloys that make the system possible. She doesn't have the complete engineering applications, and you don't have the material formulations. You need each other to make this work. Chen, I repeated, the name sounding familiar. Any relation to Robert Chen, our COO? His sister, Frank confirmed, though from what William told me they haven't spoken much in recent years. Professional disagreement of some kind. This was a complication. Robert had been one of my strongest allies during the fight for control of the company, but he'd never mentioned his sister was collaborating with my grandfather on a revolutionary project. Why wouldn't Robert tell me about this? I wondered aloud. Perhaps he doesn't know. William was extremely secretive about quantum in its final stages. Or perhaps, Frank hesitated, he has his own reasons for keeping certain information compartmentalized. William trusted him with the company operations, but not with quantum. That might be significant. A new uncertainty crept in. Could Robert have his own agenda that I wasn't aware of? The warning text I'd received before the board meeting echoed in my mind. Be careful who you trust. Not everyone at Cascade is who they appear to be. I need to speak with Dr. Chen, I decided. Today, if possible. Frank nodded approvingly. That's the right move. But before you go charging ahead, you should read what's in that envelope. It's William's private notes about quantum and about the people involved in its development. After Frank left, I spent hours reviewing the contents of the envelope and exploring the hard drive. What I found was astonishing. Not just the technical brilliance of quantum manufacturing, but my grandfather's careful documentation of everyone who had knowledge of the project, their contributions, and his assessment of their trustworthiness. Robert Chen's name appeared repeatedly, but in an unexpected context. According to my grandfather's notes, Robert had initially been involved in quantum, but was deliberately excluded from the final stages after expressing interest in licensing the technology to international manufacturers, including Global Precision, rather than keeping it exclusively within Cascade Industries. This wasn't necessarily sinister. Many executives would see international licensing as a smart business move, but it directly contradicted my grandfather's vision for the technology, which was to maintain control while selectively implementing it in projects that would maximize American manufacturing competitiveness rather than just profit. More troubling was a notation from 3 months earlier. Robert meeting with Jack again after hours, third time this month, discussing international strategy according to Margaret. Need to monitor. Had Robert been working with Jack all along? The thought was deeply unsettling. He had been my most trusted advisor in the fight to secure control of the company. If he had his own agenda, I needed more information before jumping to conclusions. I called Stanford's engineering department and managed to schedule a meeting with Dr. Eliza Chen for that afternoon. The drive to California wasn't feasible on such short notice, so we arranged a secure video conference through an encrypted system my grandfather had established specifically for quantum communications. Dr. Chen's laboratory occupied a significant portion of Stanford's Advanced Materials Research Facility. At 67, she cut an imposing figure on the video feed. Tall, elegant, with a penetrating gaze that evaluated me thoroughly as the connection stabilized. "Mr. Harrison," she greeted me, her voice carrying a slight accent. "I've been following the situation at your company with interest. I'm sorry about William's passing. He was a remarkable man. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, Dr. Chen," I said. "I believe we have a mutual project to discuss." "And what project would that be?" Her expression remained neutral. "Quantum manufacturing," I replied, watching her reaction carefully. Flicker of surprise crossed her face before she regained her composure. "William told you about our work?" "Not directly, but he arranged for me to receive the complete engineering plans and implementation designs after his death." Dr. Chen leaned back in her chair, studying me with increased interest. "I see. And you're here because you've realized those plans are useless without my material formulations." "They're brilliant, but incomplete," I acknowledged. "Just as I imagine. Your materials research only reaches its full potential when applied through the engineering systems my grandfather designed." A small smile touched her lips. "William said you were direct, a quality I appreciate." She appeared to make a decision. "I presume you have questions about your COO's involvement with the project." Her perception startled me. "Yes. How did you know?" "Because Robert is my brother, and William expressed concerns about his intentions for quantum in our last conversation." Dr. Chen's expression hardened slightly. "My brother is a brilliant operations manager. What he lacks is vision beyond quarterly profits." "So he was initially involved in quantum?" "When William and I began developing what would become quantum manufacturing, Robert saw it primarily as a revenue stream, something to be monetized immediately through licensing deals with the highest bidders. Global Precision Technologies, I supplied. Among others, Dr. Chen's disapproval was evident. Robert arranged several meetings with international manufacturers without our authorization. When William confronted him, Robert claimed he was testing market interest. This aligned with my grandfather's notes. "So you excluded him from further development?" "It was William's decision, but I supported it. Quantum isn't just another manufacturing system, Mr. Harrison. It's a fundamental reimagining of precision engineering. If implemented properly, it could revitalize American manufacturing leadership in critical industries. That kind of innovation requires responsible stewardship, not just profit maximization." Her passion was evident and reminded me intensely of my grandfather. "I agree," I said, realizing I truly did. "But that leaves me with a dilemma. Robert has been my key advisor since taking over Cascade Industries. If he has his own agenda regarding quantum—" Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. "My brother is not dishonest, merely short-sighted. He genuinely believes the fastest way to implement new technology is through market mechanisms, selling to whoever can pay and letting competition drive adoption. While you and Grandpa believed in strategic implementation, controlling how and where the technology is used to maximize its benefit to American manufacturing, I finished, understanding the philosophical divide. Precisely. It's why I've continued to withhold the material formulations even after William's death. I needed to be certain his successor shared our vision. She studied me intently. Do you, Tyler? It was the fundamental question. What did I want to do with this company and this revolutionary technology? The past 2 weeks had been so focused on maintaining control that I hadn't fully considered what I would do with that control once secured. I believe manufacturing technology should serve not just profit margins, but strategic goals, I said. Finally. That's what my grandfather taught me, and it's why I became an engineer. Quantum could transform American precision manufacturing capability, provide sustainable domestic production solutions, and redefine what automation can achieve. I met her gaze directly. But it's also the key to saving Cascade Industries right now. We need something transformative to overcome the damage from Jack's betrayal and the FBI investigation. I won't pretend my motives are purely altruistic. Dr. Chen surprised me by laughing. Now you sound exactly like William. He was never one to pretend business and idealism don't coexist, sometimes uneasily. She pressed several keys on her computer. I'm sending you the complete material formulations, testing data, and production methodologies for the quantum components. A notification appeared on my screen. Before I give you access to this file, I need your word on something. What is it? First implementation rights go to the Veterans Medical Devices Initiative. It's a nonprofit developing next-generation prosthetics and medical implants. William promised them the first quantum manufacturing run at cost. It won't be profitable, but it will provide real-world validation and immeasurable goodwill. I'll honor that commitment, I promised, understanding now why my grandfather had chosen to bypass traditional corporate channels for quantum. Some commitments transcended balance sheets. Dr. Chen pressed another key, and the file unlocked. Then we have an agreement. When you're ready to begin implementation, I'll assist with the material engineering personally. As I prepared to end the call, there was one more question I needed to ask. What should I do about Robert? If he learns about quantum, he'll want to monetize it immediately through international licensing. Dr. Chen finished my thought. The question is whether you can channel his business acumen while maintaining control of the technology's implementation. It was a challenge I wasn't sure I was ready for, managing a brilliant executive who was also the brother of my key technology partner, all while trying to rebuild a company in crisis. Trust William's judgment, Dr. Chen advised, seeming to read my thoughts. He chose you for a reason. Not because you already knew everything about running his company, but because you shared his fundamental values about what that company should stand for. I spent the next 3 days immersed in quantum manufacturing technology, working to understand its revolutionary potential fully. The more I studied, the more I realized how truly game-changing it was. A completely new approach to precision manufacturing that could produce components with unprecedented accuracy while reducing energy consumption and material waste by over 60%. On the 4th day, I called an emergency executive meeting. The team was still reeling from Jack's arrest and the ongoing FBI investigation. 2 more finance department employees had been implicated in the corporate espionage scheme, and the company's stock price had fallen another 8% after a major aerospace client announced they were reviewing their contract. I know the past 2 weeks have been challenging, I began, addressing the somber faces around the conference table. But today, we changed the narrative. Today, we stop playing defense and start building the future. I nodded to Margaret, who distributed sealed folders to each executive. What you're about to see is classified at the highest level. The technology detailed in these documents does not appear in any Cascade Industries official records. Until this moment, only 3 people in the world knew the complete details of this project. Robert's expression showed particular interest as he opened his folder. My grandfather called it quantum manufacturing, I continued. It represents a fundamental leap forward in precision engineering. Not an incremental improvement, but a complete paradigm shift. For the next 30 minutes, I walked the team through the core concepts of quantum, explaining the competitive advantages it would create and the markets it could transform. The mood in the room shifted palpably from dejection to cautious excitement. "This is extraordinary," Nathan Brooks from Automation said, studying the technical specifications. "The precision capabilities alone would put us years ahead of any competitor." "The material science applications are revolutionary," added our head of research. "These composites would transform what's possible in aerospace components." Throughout my presentation, I watched Robert carefully. His reaction was measured, impressed but not surprised, as if confirming something he had suspected. "This is undoubtedly impressive technology," he said when I finished. "But the implementation costs will be substantial, and the market positioning requires careful consideration." He leaned forward. "I would recommend a phased licensing strategy, beginning with selecting international partners who can help distribute development costs." There it was, exactly what my grandfather had predicted. "Actually," I replied, "I've already committed to a different approach. Our first implementation will be exclusive and domestic, partnering with the Veterans Medical Devices Initiative to revolutionize prosthetics manufacturing." Robert's expression tightened slightly. "A worthy cause, but hardly the most profitable." First application. The technology's value would be maximized through competitive licensing, particularly to entities like Global Precision who have the distribution networks to scale quickly. Global Precision is currently under federal investigation for attempting to steal our existing technology, I reminded him. "They're hardly an ideal partner." Jack's methods were wrong, Robert conceded, but his strategic vision wasn't entirely misplaced. International partnerships remain our best path to maximizing shareholder value. The room had grown tense, the other executives sensing the underlying conflict between us. It was time to be direct. "Robert, your operational expertise has been invaluable to Cascade, and I appreciate your perspective. But I need to know where you stand. My grandfather's vision, which I share, was to keep quantum manufacturing under strict control, implementing it strategically to strengthen American manufacturing leadership. That's non-negotiable." All eyes turned to Robert. This was the moment of truth. Would he support my leadership or become another obstacle? He studied me for several long seconds. "You're more like William than I expected," he said finally. He had the same uncompromising quality about certain principles. He closed his folder. "I won't pretend to agree with every aspect of your approach, but I respect your right to set the company's direction. My expertise remains at your disposal." It wasn't a wholehearted endorsement, but it was acceptance of my authority. For now, that would have to be enough. "Thank you," I said. "Now let's discuss how we reintroduce Cascade Industries to the world, not as a company embroiled in scandal, but as the pioneer of the next manufacturing revolution." As the meeting continued with renewed energy, my phone vibrated with a text message from an unfamiliar number. "Watch the research lab. Not everyone has shown their true colors yet." I glanced up, but everyone in the room was engaged in discussion, no one showing any sign of having just sent a message. Another warning from my unknown ally, or a new attempt to sow distrust. The strategy session lasted well into the evening, developing a comprehensive plan to stabilize the company while preparing for Quantum's controlled release. By the time we finished, a new sense of purpose had replaced the defeatism that had permeated the executive team since Jack's arrest. As the others filed out, Robert lingered behind. "You received a message during the meeting," he said. "You looked concerned. I made a split-second decision to be transparent. Someone's been sending me anonymous warnings, first about Jack, now suggesting there might be others involved that we haven't identified yet." Robert frowned. "Do you have any idea who's sending them?" "No, but so far they've been accurate." He considered this. The FBI investigation is still ongoing. It's possible they've uncovered additional conspirators. He paused. It's also possible someone is trying to create paranoia, to keep you off balance while you're still finding your footing. Which do you think it is? I asked, watching him carefully. I think, he said deliberately, that trust has to be earned, not assumed. Keep your eyes open, Tyler. Not everyone shows their true colors in a single crisis. With that cryptic advice, he left me alone with my thoughts and the weight of decisions that would determine Cascade's future. The next morning brought unexpected news. 2 FBI agents arrived at my office unannounced. Mr. Harrison, Agent Matthews greeted me. We need to discuss some new developments in our investigation. Of course, I replied, gesturing for them to sit. Has something changed? We've been reviewing the financial records seized from Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Peters. There appears to be a third principal involved in the conspiracy, someone who maintained careful distance but facilitated critical connections with global precision. My pulse quickened. Do you have a name? Agent Matthews slid a photograph across my desk. Does this person look familiar to you? I stared at the image in disbelief. It showed a middle-aged Asian man in a business suit shaking hands with a global precision executive. The man was Robert Chen. I stared at Robert's photograph, my mind struggling to reconcile the trusted advisor who had helped me secure control of the company with this damning evidence. When was this taken? I finally asked. 3 months ago in Zurich, Agent Matthews replied. We believe this meeting was where the initial agreement was made regarding the transfer of Cascade's proprietary technology. Have you arrested him? Not yet. We wanted to speak with you first, given his position within the company and his role during the transition. The pieces were falling into place. Robert's strategic positioning, his careful support that had helped me while simultaneously keeping me dependent on his guidance. Even his apparent acceptance of my quantum manufacturing plan now seemed calculated, a way to stay close to the technology while working out how to acquire it. He's scheduled to present at a manufacturing conference in Chicago tomorrow, I said, my mind racing. It would be the perfect opportunity to meet with global precision representatives. Agent Matthews nodded. We've been monitoring his communications. There's a scheduled dinner meeting that aligns with your theory. I made a swift decision. Let him go to Chicago. Don't arrest him yet. The agents exchanged surprised glances. Mr. Harrison, if Chen is planning to transfer additional technology, he doesn't have access to quantum, I interrupted. Not the complete system, but he thinks he's getting closer. If you arrest him now, we may never know the full extent of his network or who else at Cascade might be involved. What are you suggesting? Agent Matthews asked. Let me confront him directly, with your team monitoring everything. I'll get him to reveal whatever he knows, and you'll have conclusive evidence for your case. It was a risky strategy, but necessary. Robert wasn't just an executive. He was the operational backbone of Cascade. His betrayal would send shockwaves through the company that were potentially even more damaging than Jack's arrest. I needed to handle this carefully. Agent Matthews considered the proposal. It's unorthodox, but it could work, with proper safeguards. We'd need to wire you and have agents nearby. Whatever it takes, I agreed. This ends now. That evening, I called Robert and asked him to meet me at my grandfather's house to discuss final adjustments to the quantum implementation plan before his Chicago trip. He agreed readily, suggesting he bring dinner from my grandfather's favorite, steakhouse, another calculated touch of familiarity. The FBI technical team arrived hours before, discreetly wiring the study with recording devices and setting up surveillance from a van parked down the street. Agent Matthews supervised as they attached a nearly invisible microphone to my shirt collar. Remember, the goal is to get him talking about his connections to Global Precision and any other conspirators still inside Cascade, she instructed. Let him incriminate himself. Don't make accusations that would cause him to shut down. At precisely 11 p.m., Robert arrived carrying 2 paper bags of takeout. His demeanor was relaxed and collegial, the trusted lieutenant ready to support his young CEO. I thought we could use some proper fuel for our planning session, he said, setting down the bags in the kitchen. William always said no good strategy was ever developed on an empty stomach. He did say that, I agreed, accepting the offered container. Let's eat in his study. I have the latest quantum schematics pulled up on his computer. As we settled into the comfortable leather chairs in my grandfather's study, Robert began discussing the Chicago Manufacturing Conference with practiced enthusiasm. The timing is perfect for previewing hints about our new direction, he suggested. Not specific details about quantum, of course, but enough to generate buzz. Start rebuilding market confidence. That makes sense, I replied, taking a bite of steak. Who will you be meeting with in Chicago besides the conference organizers? The question was casual, but I watched him carefully. Robert didn't miss a beat, just the usual industry contacts. Some potential clients who are nervous after Jack's situation, nothing extraordinary. No meeting with global precision representatives? I asked, keeping my tone conversational. A flicker of tension crossed his face, quickly suppressed. Why would you think that? Just curious. They're still a major player in the industry, despite the current investigation. Robert set down his fork. Tyler, I know you're still finding your footing here, so let me give you some advice. Be very careful about even mentioning global precision right now. With the FBI investigation ongoing, any contact could be misinterpreted. That's interesting. Advice, considering you're scheduled to have dinner with their head of acquisitions tomorrow night at the Capitol Grill. The room went completely silent. Robert's expression shifted from shock to calculation in seconds. I see, he said finally. You've been monitoring my communications. The FBI has. He nodded, as if this confirmed something he'd suspected. And now you're wearing a wire. How disappointingly predictable. I abandoned the pretense. Why, Robert? My grandfather trusted you. I trusted you. Because William was wrong, he replied, his voice suddenly passionate. Wrong about how to maximize quantum's potential. Wrong about keeping it locked behind American walls when it could transform manufacturing globally. So you decided to sell it to the highest bidder? Just like Jack? Robert's expression hardened. Don't compare me to Jack. He was a thief, pure and simple. I'm a businessman who understands global markets and how innovation actually spreads. He leaned forward. Do you know what happens to revolutionary technology when it's restricted to a single company or country? It stagnates. It gets buried under bureaucracy and nationalism. That's not what my grandfather believed. William was a brilliant engineer, but an outdated businessman. The world has changed. Global Precision has manufacturing facilities in 12 countries. They could implement quantum 10 times faster than we could alone, while making sure America loses its competitive edge in precision manufacturing, I pointed out. That was their plan all along. Acquire our technology and leave us behind. Robert shook his head. It's not that simple. We would have maintained ownership and collected royalties. It was a business arrangement, not treason. So why the secrecy? Why work with Jack behind my grandfather's back? Because William wouldn't listen to reason. Robert's composure cracked momentarily. I tried for months to convince him, but he was fixated on this outdated idea of American manufacturing supremacy. Jack at least understood the global marketplace. Jack was embezzling from the company and selling trade secrets. His methods were flawed, Robert conceded. But his vision wasn't entirely wrong. I studied the man who had been my grandfather's right hand for a decade. When did it start? When did you begin betraying him? Robert's expression cooled. I prefer to think of it as correcting his course, and it started when he excluded me from Quantum's final development, when he made it clear he didn't trust me with his legacy. He leaned back. The irony is that I could have made him 10 times wealthier if he'd just listened. It wasn't about wealth for him. It was about principles. Principles don't build shareholder value, Robert replied dismissively. No, but they Build legacies that last. I stood up. The FBI has everything they need now. It's over, Robert. He didn't seem surprised or even particularly concerned. You think this is the end? You still don't understand how business works at this level, Tyler. Global Precision has connections in a dozen countries. They have lobbyists, politicians, and executives in their pocket. This is just a temporary setback for them. Maybe. But it's the end for you. As if on cue, Agent Matthews and 2 other agents entered the study. Robert remained seated as they read him his rights and placed him in handcuffs. You're making a mistake, he told me as they led him out. Quantum could change the world, but not if you keep it locked in a vault. I'm not keeping it in a vault, I replied. I'm just making sure it serves the right purpose. After Robert was gone, Agent Matthews returned. We got everything we needed. Combined with the evidence we already had, this should be enough for a conviction. What happens now? I asked. We'll continue our investigation. There may be others in your company who were part of this network. And Cascade Industries? She hesitated. That's up to you, but you should prepare for more turbulence. When news breaks that both your CFO and COO were involved in corporate espionage, your stakeholders are going to be concerned. It was an understatement. The company had barely begun to recover from Jack's arrest. Robert's betrayal would trigger another crisis of confidence that could potentially be fatal unless I changed the narrative completely. The next morning, I called an emergency press conference. Journalists filled Cascade Industries' main lobby, eager for a statement about the latest arrest in what was becoming one of the biggest corporate espionage scandals in years. Instead of appearing defeated, I took the podium with confidence. Good morning. For the past few weeks, Cascade Industries has been in the news for all the wrong reasons. Today, that changes. I outlined the FBI investigation briefly, acknowledging the betrayal by trusted executives, but emphasizing the company's full cooperation with authorities. Those individuals chose personal gain over integrity, and they'll answer for those choices in court. But their actions do not define Cascade Industries. What defines us is innovation, precision, and vision. I nodded to Margaret, who activated the large screen behind me. Images of the quantum manufacturing technology appeared, carefully, selected to demonstrate its revolutionary potential without revealing proprietary details. Today, I'm announcing the launch of quantum manufacturing, a technology platform developed in complete secrecy by my grandfather, William Harrison, that represents a fundamental leap forward in precision engineering. For the next 20 minutes, I explained how quantum would transform manufacturing capabilities while creating hundreds of new American jobs. I announced our partnership with the Veterans Medical Devices Initiative and our commitment to keeping the core technology exclusively produced in the United States. This isn't just about a new manufacturing process. It's about recommitting to American innovation leadership. It's about creating technology that serves a greater purpose than just profit. By the time I finished and took questions, the energy in the room had transformed completely. The narrative was shifting from scandal to innovation, from betrayal to renewal. One veteran technology reporter raised her hand. Mr. Harrison, skeptics might say you're using this announcement to distract from the scandals. How do you respond? I'd say they're missing the point, I replied. The people who betrayed Cascade were willing to sell our future for quick profit. Quantum manufacturing represents the opposite approach, building something revolutionary that creates lasting value. Judge us by the results, which will begin rolling out next quarter. The press conference was a calculated risk, but it worked. By the next morning, headlines focused more on Quantum's potential than on Robert's arrest. Our stock price, which had been in free fall, stabilized and began to climb as technology analysts evaluated what little we'd revealed about the new system. Most importantly, it bought me the time and goodwill needed to rebuild Cascade's executive team with people I could trust. 6 months after that fateful board meeting where Jack was escorted out by FBI agents, I stood on the factory floor of our newly retrofitted Boston facility, watching as the first quantum manufacturing line came to life. Dr. Eliza Chen stood beside me, her usual stern expression softened by evident pride as we watched precision medical components being created with unprecedented accuracy. "William would have loved seeing this," she said quietly. "He's here in every blueprint," I replied, feeling my grandfather's presence in each innovative detail of the design. The past months had been a relentless challenge of rebuilding trust with clients, with employees, with investors. Jack and Robert had both accepted plea deals, agreeing to testify against executives at Global Precision in exchange for reduced sentences. 3 other Cascade employees implicated in the scheme had been removed, and a new leadership team was gradually reshaping the company culture around principles of innovation and integrity. The first prosthetic components created by Quantum had exceeded every performance metric, generating overwhelmingly positive coverage in both medical and technology publications. Orders for the system were already backlogged for 18 months, with priority given to American manufacturers in critical industries. As I walked the floor, inspecting the revolutionary system my grandfather had designed, my phone buzzed with an unexpected name: Mom. I hadn't spoken to my mother since the day of Robert's arrest. She had disappeared to a wellness retreat in Arizona, refusing all contact as she processed the dual betrayal of her husband and the family company. The one message I'd received from her, weeks earlier, had been brief: "I need time." I stepped away from the factory noise to take the call. "Mom?" "Hello, Tyler." Her voice sounded different, steadier, less artificial than the carefully modulated tone she'd adopted during her years with Jack. "I saw the segment about Cascade on the business news. Quantum technology looks remarkable. It is. We're just starting the first production run today." A pause. "I'm proud of you. I should have said that sooner." The simple statement caught me off guard. My mother had rarely expressed pride in my engineering career, always seeming to view it as a phase before I embraced real business. "Thank you," I said finally. "That means a lot." "I've been thinking about your father lately," she continued, her voice softening. "How excited he would be to see what you've accomplished. He always said you had a special mind for solving problems." My father had been gone for 14 years, but the mention of him still brought a pang of loss. "I didn't know you remembered those conversations." "I remember more than I've acknowledged," she admitted. "After your father died, it was easier to create a new life than face the pain of the old one. Jack offered certainty when everything felt uncertain." "I understand that now," I said, surprised to find I meant it. The past months of crisis management had given me a new perspective on how people cope with insecurity and fear. "I'm selling the house in Vermont," she continued. "Too many memories, good and bad. I've bought a small place near Cambridge. I'm taking business classes at the extension school, something I never did despite all those years of playing the corporate wife." "That's great, Mom." "I'd like to see the new facility sometime," she said hesitantly. "If that would be all right. Your grandfather's final innovation. It seems fitting." "I'd like that," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. 1 year, too. The day after inheriting Cascade Industries, I stood on the stage at the grand opening of our expanded quantum manufacturing campus. Behind me, the factory that had once been on the verge of scandal-driven collapse now hummed with revolutionary technology, creating components that would transform everything from medical devices to aerospace systems. My grandfather believed manufacturing could solve problems beyond just creating products, I told the assembled crowd of employees, clients, and industry leaders. He envisioned systems that prioritized precision and quality over mere cost-cutting, innovations that maintained American leadership in critical technologies rather than surrendering it. In the front row, Frank Sullivan sat beside Dr. Chen, the unlikely messenger who had delivered my grandfather's greatest innovation when I needed it most. Margaret stood to the side of the stage, coordinating the event with her typical efficiency. And surprisingly, in the middle row, my mother watched with quiet attention, a tentative connection rebuilding between us. Today, we're not just opening a manufacturing facility, I continued. We're demonstrating a new possibility for American innovation. Quantum manufacturing isn't just a Cascade Industries product. It's an invitation to reimagine what precision engineering can achieve in the decades ahead. After the ceremony, as guests toured the facility and journalists gathered quotes from beaming employees, I found a quiet moment alone in my office overlooking the factory floor. The space was filled with the steady rhythm of the quantum systems, each one creating components with unprecedented precision and efficiency. I ran my fingers along the edge of my desk, made from the same polished maple as my grandfather's, and thought about the journey that had brought me here. The battle for control had transformed me in ways I couldn't have imagined. I had entered as an engineer with technical knowledge, but emerged as a leader with vision and purpose. The fight for Cascade Industries had never really been about power or even money. It had been about values, about what kind of company we wanted to build and what principles would guide it. Jack had seen the company as a vehicle for personal enrichment, a collection of assets to be leveraged for maximum profit regardless of consequences. My grandfather had seen it as a force for innovation and American industrial strength, a vehicle for technologies that could help address manufacturing challenges while maintaining domestic capabilities. As I watched the quantum systems at work, I thought about legacy. Not just the company my grandfather had left me, but the future I was now building with it. Cascade Industries under my leadership was becoming something even my grandfather hadn't fully envisioned, a pioneer in precision manufacturing that was changing industry standards globally while revitalizing domestic production. Jack and Robert's attempt to seize control had backfired spectacularly. Their short-sighted greed had accelerated the very innovations they had tried to steal and sell, bringing quantum manufacturing to market years ahead of schedule and under stricter security than might otherwise have existed. Sometimes, I reflected, our greatest challenges become the catalyst for our most important transformations. My grandfather had known this when he named me his successor. Despite my youth and inexperience, he hadn't chosen me because I already knew how to run his company. He had chosen me because he trusted me to learn, to grow, and ultimately to take his vision to places he couldn't have reached himself. The company was no longer just my grandfather's legacy. It was becoming my own. And the $150 million valuation that had once seemed so impossibly large was now just the beginning of what Cascade Industries would become under the banner of quantum manufacturing. As for my mother's insistence that my stepfather should have been in charge, well, that particular family disagreement had been settled definitively, not just by the courts that sentenced Jack to prison, but by the revolutionary manufacturing systems now operating on 3 continents, visible reminders of what happens when the right person takes control of a vision that matters. The journey hadn't ended. In many ways, it was just beginning. But whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the confidence that comes from having been tested and proven equal to the task. My grandfather had left me his company, but more importantly, he had left me his belief that manufacturing could change the world for the better. That was the true inheritance, and I intended to make the most of it. 5 years had passed since that fateful day when I discovered my grandfather had left me his $150 million company. The Cascade Industries of today bore little resemblance to the troubled company I'd inherited. Quantum manufacturing had transformed not just our business, but entire industries that relied on precision components. Forbes had recently named us one of America's most innovative companies, and our market valuation had quadrupled. What had once seemed an impossible burden, a young engineer thrust into corporate leadership, had become the defining opportunity of my life. I stood at the window of my office, watching employees cross the campus of our expanded headquarters, The original buildings had been joined by 3 new facilities, including the William Harrison Innovation Center, where we partnered with engineering students from leading universities. "Mr. Harrison?" My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your mother has arrived for lunch. Send her in, please." Our monthly lunches had become a tradition over the past few years. After the dust settled from the scandals, my mother had reinvented herself, earning an MBA and starting a foundation that helped women re-enter the workforce after personal setbacks. The painful distance between us had gradually transformed into a relationship based on mutual respect, if not the easy closeness we'd had before my father died. "The campus looks better every time I visit," she said as she entered, embracing me briefly. "Wait until you see the new prototype lab. We've finally got the advanced materials division set up the way Dr. Chen wanted." As we walked to the company cafe, several employees greeted us warmly. My mother noticed everything. "They genuinely respect you," she observed quietly. "Not just as the owner, but as a leader." "I had to earn that," I reminded her. "Those first 2 years weren't easy." "I know." She paused as we reached a display case holding my grandfather's original prototypes. "Your grandfather would be proud, not just of the company's success, but of how you've achieved it." The words meant more coming from her than they would have from anyone else. For years, she had been Jack's strongest advocate, believing my grandfather had made a terrible mistake in choosing me. Over lunch, we discussed the Foundation's latest initiative, a mentorship program for young women interested in STEM careers. As we finished, my mother hesitated before pulling an envelope from her bag. "I've been going through some of my old papers, and I found this. It's a letter your father wrote to you before he died. He asked me to give it to you when you were ready. I think now is the time." I stared at the envelope, stunned. My father had been gone for 19 years. The thought that his words had been waiting all this time left me momentarily speechless. "I didn't know this existed," I finally managed. "He wrote it during his last hospital stay, when he knew he wouldn't be coming home." Her voice wavered slightly. "I couldn't bring myself to give it to you after he passed. And then later, during my years with Jack, it felt complicated. I'm sorry I kept it from you for so long." I carefully opened the envelope, pulling out 2 pages of my father's distinctive handwriting. "My dear Tyler, if you're reading this, I've lost the battle I've been fighting. I'm writing this from my hospital bed, watching you sleeping in the chair beside me. You're only 9, but I can already see the man you'll become, curious, determined, and kind. I won't be there for so many moments I've dreamed of sharing with you. I won't see you graduate, start your career, or find your path in life. But I want you to know, I believe in you completely. Your grandfather and I have been talking about your future. He sees in you what I see, a rare combination of technical brilliance and human understanding. He's promised to be there for you in the ways I cannot, to help guide that brilliant mind of yours. Someday, you might find yourself carrying on the Harrison legacy at Cascade. If that happens, remember that a company is more than balance sheets and production lines. It's people working together to build something meaningful. Lead with integrity, even when it's difficult. Value innovation over easy profits. And never forget that the work we do matters, not just for what it creates, but for how it shapes the world around us. I am so proud of you, son. Whatever path you choose, walk it with courage and compassion. All my love, Dad. I carefully folded the letter, emotion tightening my throat. After a moment, I looked at my mother. Thank you for this. It means everything. She nodded, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. He always knew you were special. So did your grandfather. I was the one who took too long to see it. As we walked back to my office, a strange sense of completion settled over me. The circle that had begun with my grandfather's unexpected bequest now felt whole in a way it hadn't before. 3 generations of Harrison men, My grandfather with his visionary engineering, my father with his compassionate perspective, and now me, trying to honor both legacies while forging my own path. That evening, after most employees had gone home, I visited the small museum we'd created to showcase Cascade's history. My grandfather's original drafting table stood in the center, surrounded by models of his most significant innovations. I placed my father's letter in a frame beside a photograph of the three of us, my grandfather, my father, and 9-year-old me in the original machine shop. 3 generations, connected by more than just DNA or a family business. Connected by a shared belief that what we build matters, not just for what it is, but for what it represents. Jack Reynolds would be released from prison next year, his sentence reduced for cooperation. Robert Chen was still serving his longer term. Their betrayals had nearly destroyed everything my grandfather built, but in an unexpected way, they had also been the catalyst for something greater. Without that crisis, quantum manufacturing might have remained just an idea in my grandfather's private workshop, rather than the revolutionary system it had become. Sometimes our greatest challenges truly do become the foundation for our most important achievements. As I left the museum, I passed a tour group of engineering students being shown around the facility. One young woman asked a question that caught my attention. "But wasn't there a huge scandal when you inherited the company? How did you overcome that and turn things around?" The tour guide looked up and noticed me standing nearby. Perhaps Mr. Harrison would like to answer that himself. The students turned, eyes widening as they recognized me. The simple answer, I told them, is that I had something my opponents didn't. "Technology?" one student guessed. "Controlling shares?" suggested another. I smiled. Those helped, but what really made the difference was purpose. My grandfather and father believed that building things that matter is a responsibility, not just an opportunity. When you're guided by that kind of purpose, you find strength you didn't know you had. As I walked toward the exit, I glanced back at my grandfather's drafting table one last time. The $150 million company he had left me was now valued at over $600 million. But the true inheritance had never been about money. It had been about vision, integrity, and the courage to fight for something larger than yourself. Some might say I was lucky, that the company fell into my lap through inheritance rather than effort. But those who had witnessed the battle for Cascade Industries knew better. The company hadn't simply been given to me. I had fought for it, risked everything for it, and ultimately earned the right to lead it. My mother had once insisted my stepfather should be in charge, believing I wasn't ready for such responsibility. Now, after 5 years of transformation and growth, the results spoke for themselves. The true measure of leadership isn't where you start, it's where you lead others to go, and we were just getting started. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.